She hit the mat hard enough to knock the breath out of her lungs, and the whole room laughed. The instructor stood over her, arms crossed, smirking at the woman in scrubs like she was the punchline to a joke everyone already knew. 31 years old, 5'4". A nurse who'd driven her nephew to a trial class at a martial arts dojo in Redstone, Colorado, and ended up flat on her back in front of 15 strangers. What none of them knew, not the laughing students, not the sneering instructor, not the parents checking their phones, was that Emily Carter had once kept 3 soldiers alive with her bare hands in a ditch outside Kandahar while a firefight raged 30 meters away. She got up quietly, didn't say a word, just brushed the dust off her knees. That was the first mistake Marcus Hale ever made. He thought her silence meant she had nothing left. He had no idea what silence actually costs a person who's learned to carry it. If this story already has you hooked, do me a favor. Hit that follow button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. Fists. Emily Carter had not planned on being anyone's cautionary tale that Tuesday evening. She'd worked a 10-hour shift at Redstone General, which was the kind of shift that didn't have a clean ending. A trauma case that ran long, a teenage boy with a fractured arm who kept asking if he'd still be able to play baseball, a sepsis patient in Bay 4 whose family stood in the hallway asking questions Emily wasn't authorized to answer, but answered anyway because the attending was running between 2 codes and someone had to. She'd changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, splashed water on her face, pulled her hair back into the same ponytail she'd been wearing since 6 in the morning, and driven across town to pick up her nephew from her sister's apartment. Danny was 8. He was at the age where everything had to be the coolest thing in the world, or nothing at all. And for the past 3 weeks, the coolest thing in the world was martial arts. He'd seen a tournament highlight reel on YouTube and had not stopped talking about it since. Emily's sister, Pauline, had looked up Iron Ridge Martial Arts, found a Tuesday trial class for kids, and asked Emily if she could take him since Pauline had a work call that ran until 7. Emily had said yes without thinking. She almost always said yes without thinking when it came to Danny. Iron Ridge sat between a laundromat and a cell phone repair shop on Callaway Street, the kind of storefront that had a hand-painted sign and a glass door covered in decals showing tournament brackets and belt rankings. Inside, the floor was covered in blue foam mats. A row of folding chairs lined one wall for parents. The air smelled like rubber and someone's old sweat that no amount of ventilation had fully cleared. Danny walked in with his eyes wide and immediately found 3 other kids his age near the equipment rack. Emily found a seat, set her bag on the floor, and checked her phone out of reflex. 2 messages from Pauline asking how it was going, 1 notification from the hospital scheduling app she'd been ignoring for a week. The class hadn't started yet. Maybe a dozen adults and kids were scattered across the mats, stretching or talking. Near the front, the instructor was running one of his older students through some kind of technique review. Quick, practiced movements, the kind that looked effortless only because they'd been drilled until the body stopped thinking. Marcus Hale was not a small man. He was broad across the shoulders, maybe 6'2", and he moved like someone who'd spent a long time being the most capable person in every room he walked into. Emily had seen the type before, in uniform and out of it. The certainty in how he carried himself wasn't earned the way he thought it was. It was constructed, maintained, performed. But she wasn't there to analyze the instructor. She was there to sit in a folding chair for 45 minutes and make sure Danny had a good first class. That plan lasted about 12 minutes. Hale called the class together and ran a quick warm-up, jumping jacks, basic stretches, a few light drills for the kids. He was good with them, actually, patient in a mechanical way, correcting foot placement, keeping the energy up. Danny was grinning so wide Emily could see it from across the room, and that was enough. She went back to scrolling through the hospital's scheduling notifications. She didn't notice Hale walking toward her until he was standing 2 feet away. "You planning to sit there all night?" Emily looked up. He was addressing her, not anyone else. A couple of the other parents glanced over. "I'm watching my nephew," she said. "I can see that." He crossed his arms. "We've got a policy here, so adults in the room either participate or wait outside. Easier for the kids to focus." Emily looked around the space. 2 other parents were sitting in chairs along the wall, neither of them being asked to move. She registered that immediately, but didn't say it. Sure, she said. I'll wait outside. She picked up her bag and stood, and that's when he said it. Not meanly, exactly, but with the particular ease of someone who didn't expect to be challenged. What do you do? You're in scrubs. He nodded at her bag, where the corner of her hospital ID was visible. Nurse, she said. Something shifted in his expression, not hostile yet. More like a category had been confirmed in his mind. Right, he gestured at the mats. You could join the adults' free session if you want. We do a light technical review after the kids' class. Good for stress relief. The way he said it, good for stress relief, carried something underneath it. Like a nurse with a ponytail and 10 hours of triage behind her might benefit from learning what real physical discipline looked like. Emily had been awake since 5:30. Her lower back hurt. She should have said no. Okay, she said instead. What happened next was partly her fault and partly not. The kids' class wrapped up, Danny went to the water fountain with 2 new friends, and Hale called the adult session. 6 people, mix of ages, both men and women, onto the mat. He walked them through a takedown sequence, demonstrating on one of his older students. It was clean technique. Emily paid attention because that's what she did. She'd spent her entire career paying close attention in rooms where the stakes were high. When they broke into pairs to drill it, Hale came to her. Nurse, right? He said again, like she might have changed professions in the last 20 minutes. We'll go light. You don't have to. No, I insist. He said it with a small smile that went to the other adults in the room and not to her. The drill was supposed to be a controlled entry. One person initiates, the other defends with a step, and redirect. Basic. Emily had done the mechanics of it 100 times in different configurations, so she moved without thinking about it too hard, stepped inside his entry angle, and her redirect was a little too efficient. Not aggressive, just precise. He felt it. She could tell by the slight change in his footwork, the way he reset his stance. That was when the whole energy of the session shifted. He didn't say anything for a moment, then, again. The second time was not a drill. He came in harder and caught her off balance. She'd been watching Danny at the water fountain for half a second. And the next thing she knew, she was on the mat. It wasn't a teaching moment. It was a demonstration. The room had gone a little quiet. Emily lay there for a beat, staring at the fluorescent lights, calculating whether anything hurt. Her hip would bruise. Her pride was untouched, because pride and dignity weren't the same thing, and she'd learned that a long time ago. Someone laughed. One of the adult students, a guy in his 20s who'd been watching her since she walked in. Then another person. Not cruelty exactly, but the kind of social laughter that fills a vacuum, that says we agree this is funny before anyone's decided if they actually think so. Hale stood over her. You all right? Fine. She got up without using her hands, brushed off her knees. Maybe stick to the basics, he said, loud enough for the room. This isn't like taking someone's blood pressure. A couple more laughs. Danny had come back from the water fountain and was watching from the edge of the mat with wide eyes. Emily glanced at him and gave a small, deliberate nod. I'm okay. And watched his shoulders drop an inch. She didn't say anything else. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, and waited there while Danny gathered his things. In the car, Danny was quiet for 2 blocks. Then, he knocked you down. Yep. That was mean. It wasn't great, Emily said. Are we going to go back? She thought about it. The way Hale had looked at her, not with anger or even real contempt, but with the bored certainty of someone who'd categorized her on sight and felt confirmed in it. She thought about Danny's face when he'd been on the mat, grinning. She thought about the other parents in those folding chairs who'd watched and said nothing. Yeah, she said. We're going back. Metz. She returned Thursday to register Danny for the full session. The front desk was staffed by a teenager who handled the paperwork without looking up from his phone. Emily was filling out the emergency contact form when Hale came in from the back, saw her, and stopped. Nurse? He said it the same way someone might say, oh, her. Emily? She said. My name is Emily Carter. He came to the counter and leaned against it. You here to sign up the kid? Yes. And yourself? Not yet. He nodded, the way someone nods when they've already decided something. You should know what happened Tuesday. That was on me. I went too hard. She waited. But also, he continued, and now there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, a certain gathering of energy. You've got a problem with your base. You're reactive. That's a nursing thing, I think. You're trained to respond to other people's crises, so you wait for signals instead of setting the tempo. It was almost an insightful observation, buried inside something condescending. Medic, Emily said. He frowned. Sorry? I'm a nurse now. Before that, I was an Army combat medic, 3 deployments. She set the pen down. But you were saying something about my base. Hale's expression shifted through several things in quick succession. She'd seen it before. Not quite embarrassment, not quite reassessment. More like someone recalculating how much their assumption was going to cost them and deciding the cost was manageable. Army medic. He said it the way people said things they didn't quite believe. So you had some training. Some. Not the same as real combatives, though. He was warming to it now, standing straighter. Field medics learn enough to not get killed. That's different from actual hand-to-hand discipline. Different skill set, different application. The teenager at the desk had finally put his phone down and was watching them. Emily picked up the pen and finished the form. You're probably right, she said. I've had guys in here, vets, actual combat guys. And they all say the same thing. What you learn in the field doesn't translate clean. A lot of habits that work in chaos but fall apart when someone knows what they're doing. That makes sense, Emily said. She handed the form back to the teenager. Hale was watching her, clearly waiting for something more, a challenge, a defense, an argument he could win in front of his own front desk. She zipped her bag and shouldered it. Friday at 6, Hale said. I'm running an adult sparring session. Invite only, but I'm making an exception. Come see what actual trained people look like. Might help you understand what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about, Emily said. Then come anyway. She looked at him for a moment. He had the particular confidence of someone who'd never been seriously wrong about anything physical, who'd trained hard and tested himself against people who fought the way he fought, in places with rules, with referees, with mats that caught you when you fell. I'll be there, she said. She almost didn't go. Friday was a 12-hour shift that turned into 13, a pediatric asthma case that resolved clean, a stroke at 4 p.m. that didn't, a construction worker with a degloving injury on his forearm that required 3 nurses and a surgeon and everyone's complete focus for 90 minutes. By the time Emily clocked out, she'd eaten half a granola bar and had a headache that lived directly behind her left eye. She sat in her car in the hospital parking garage for 4 minutes. She thought about her apartment. She thought about her couch. She thought about the fact that she owed nobody anything, and going home was a completely legitimate choice. Then she thought about Danny's face on Tuesday. Not the wide-eyed grin from when he was on the mat, but the other face, the one he'd made when he was watching from the edge of the mat and she was on the floor and people were laughing. He'd looked scared, and then he'd looked at her, and she'd nodded, and his shoulders had dropped. She drove to Iron Ridge. What? The parking lot had 6 cars in it when she arrived. Through the glass doors, she could see the overhead lights were all on, the mats cleared. Hale was already inside with 5 of his adult students, the ones who'd been there Tuesday, plus 2 she hadn't seen. They were mid-warm-up, moving through partner drills, the rhythm of it casual and practiced. Emily changed in the bathroom, left her scrubs folded on the counter, and came out in the workout clothes she'd had in her bag since Thursday. Compression leggings, long-sleeved shirt. She'd taped her left ring finger to her middle finger, an old habit from a time when that finger had gotten broken and she'd learned to work around it. When she came out, Hale saw her and said nothing, just pointed to the stretch area. She warmed up alone. She didn't push into anything dramatic, hip circles, shoulder rotations, forward folds, the standard sequence she'd been doing since she was 22, and someone in her unit had told her flexibility was the thing you don't train until you regret it. She'd been stretching religiously ever since. The other students watched her in the way people watch someone they've already decided is out of her depth, with a kind of polite anticipatory sympathy, the look that precedes bless her heart. Hale called the session together after 15 minutes. Quick review of the ground rules, controlled contact, tap out respected. Nothing to the throat or eyes. He said it in the same tone you'd use to cover formalities before doing something you weren't actually worried about. "We're going to do open sparring in pairs," he said. "Rotate every 5 minutes. Emily?" He used her name for the first time, and there was something in it that wasn't quite courtesy. "You're with me first." They squared up on the center mat. Emily looked at him and thought, he's going to test the edges first. Find where I panic. She'd stopped panicking at things years before she'd ever joined the army. Hale moved first. A quick jab combination, nothing with full commitment, the kind of thing you throw to see what someone does. Emily slipped the second jab, not dramatically, just enough, and reset. He threw again, and she checked the kick that followed with her shin, and they circled. "You've got some boxing," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was data collection. "Little bit," she said. He shot for a double leg, and she sprawled. He recovered and came back up, and she could see it in his face now. The calculation adjusting. She wasn't what he'd expected. She wasn't fluent in any single system he recognized, which meant she was harder to categorize, and categorization was how he controlled his environment. They went 2 minutes. She didn't try to win anything. She defended cleanly, gave up no takedowns, threw almost nothing. When Hale stepped back to reset, he was breathing slightly harder than he'd expected to be. "Not bad," he said. She nodded. They reset. He came in with more intent this time. A level change, a grip on her collar, driving forward. She felt the force of him and let it come, redirecting slightly rather than stopping it, and ended up behind him for a half second before he spun out. The room was very quiet. One of the other students, the guy in his 20s who'd laughed on Tuesday, had stopped moving. He was just watching. Hale reset again. Something had shifted in him. Not anger, not yet, but the hard edge of someone whose expectations have been violated. He was no longer testing, he was competing. He came in fast, committed. A combination she'd need to either take or give significant ground to avoid. She chose neither. What she did instead was, later, she wouldn't be able to fully explain it in any way that sounded like anything other than instinct. Her body made a decision that her conscious mind simply ratified. She went into his momentum instead of away from it, found the angle that shouldn't have been there, and in less than 2 seconds she had him controlled, arms secured, off balance, her weight distributed in a way that made resistance geometrically awkward. She didn't slam him. She walked him down, deliberately, to the mat, and held him there. The room was completely silent. Hale was face down on the blue foam, right arm extended and locked at the elbow, and Emily was kneeling behind him in a position of total control, her breathing calm, her posture not triumphant but functional. She wasn't performing anything. She was just there. "Tap," she said quietly. He tapped. She let him go and stood. He got up slowly. He didn't look at her for a moment. Looked at the far wall, at his students, at the middle distance. His jaw was tight. "Again," he said. She looked at him. His face had gone flat in the particular way of people who are used to winning and haven't located the version of themselves that knows how to lose. Emily picked up her bag from beside the mat. "I don't think so," she said. "We're not done." "I am." She looked at him directly, without heat, without apology. "I came because you invited me. I'm leaving because I'm done." She glanced at the other students. The 20-something who'd laughed, the 2 women who hadn't, the older man in the corner who'd watched the whole thing with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Danny starts next week," she said to no one in particular. "Tuesday class." She walked to the door. Behind her, the room stayed silent. She pushed through into the night air and stood by her car and let out a breath she'd been holding for longer than she realized. The parking lot was empty except for the other cars. A streetlight buzzed faintly overhead. She sat in her driver's seat and checked her phone. A text from Pauline. "How'd it go?" Emily typed back, "Fine, Danny starts Tuesday." Then she sat there for a moment, in the quiet, with the engine off. Her left knee ached from the sprawl. Her headache was still there, a little quieter now. She thought about the way Hale had looked at her. Not the moment she'd put him on the mat, but before that, in the parking lot of her memory. You're trained to respond to other people's crises. He wasn't entirely wrong. That's what she'd been doing her entire adult life, reading the situation, understanding what it needed, putting herself in the necessary position. In a tent outside a forward operating base with blood on her hands and a radio on her hip. In Bay 4 with a family who needed someone to look them in the eye. In a room full of people who'd already decided she wasn't a threat, and didn't understand that those two things, not being a threat and not being dangerous, were not the same. She started the car. Behind her, through the glass door of Iron Ridge Martial Arts, she could see the light was still on. She could see Hale standing in the center of the mat, not moving, facing the wall. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove home. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, sitting in that car and driving through Redstone's Friday night streets, was that one of the students in that room had pulled out her phone while Emily was still on the mat and started recording. The video was 23 seconds long. It started with Hale's final attack, fast, committed, everything he had, and ended with Emily walking him calmly to the floor. No sound effects, no commentary, just the image of a man who'd spent years performing invincibility, finding out in 23 seconds what it felt like to be wrong about himself. By the time Emily got home, changed clothes, and sat down with a glass of water, the video had been shared in a local Redstone community group with the caption, "Does anyone know who this woman is?" The instructor told her on Tuesday that nurses hide behind real soldiers. This was Friday. Her phone was on the other side of the room. By morning, that group had 400 comments. She didn't see the comments until Saturday morning. She'd slept badly. Not because of Hale, but because that's how she slept after long shifts, her body too tired to fully let go and too wired to fully surrender. She woke at 6:15 out of habit, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with her phone the way she did every morning, scrolling through the overnight notifications from the hospital app, a couple of texts from Pauline, the weather. The first sign something was different was a notification from the Redstone Community Board Facebook group, which she'd joined 2 years ago to find a reliable plumber and had mostly forgotten about. Someone had tagged her name in a comment. Then 3 more people had tagged her, then 11. She put her coffee down. The video was the first thing in the thread, 23 seconds. She watched it once, and then again, and on the second watch, she understood what it looked like from the outside in a way she hadn't been able to see from the inside. From the outside, it looked decisive. It looked controlled. It looked like something that didn't belong in a Tuesday free session at a strip mall dojo in Redstone, Colorado. The caption read, "Does anyone know who this woman is?" The instructor told her on Tuesday that nurses hide behind real soldiers. This was Friday. 412 comments. She put the phone face down on the table and finished her coffee. By 9, the comment count was at 700. By 10, someone had shared the video outside the local group, and it was moving through 2 different Redstone neighborhood feeds and a thread on a veterans forum she'd never heard of. Her name appeared in maybe a third of the comments. People who knew her from the hospital, people who'd heard of her, people building a biography out of fragments and speculation. "I think she works at Redstone General. My cousin had her as a nurse. She's incredible. Army medic, 3 tours, look her up. She was not on social media. She had no accounts to check. No profile to manage, no comment section to respond to. This had been a deliberate choice she'd made years ago and had never once regretted until this specific Saturday morning when she realized that the absence of an account didn't mean the absence of a story. It just meant other people were writing it. Pauline called at 10:30. "Emily, I'm seeing something on the community board." "I know." "There's a video." "I know, Pauline." "You look—" A pause, and Emily could hear her sister working through it. "You look like you knew exactly what you were doing." "I did." Another pause, shorter. "Should I be worried?" "No," Emily said. "I just went to a sparring session. Nothing happened that shouldn't have." The guy who runs the place, Marcus Hale, people in the comments are saying things about him, like not just about Friday, about other times. Emily set down her mug. "What kind of things?" "Apparently this isn't the first time he's done something like what he did to you Tuesday. There are parents saying he's pulled the same thing on other moms, humiliated people in front of their kids. One woman saying her son quit because Hale kept making examples of her whenever she came to watch." Emily was quiet for a moment, looking at the refrigerator, where a drawing Danny had made for her was held up by a magnet shaped like a cactus. A stick figure in scrubs, a stethoscope around its neck, a red cross on its shirt. Aunt Emily written underneath in large, uncertain letters. "Is Danny still signed up?" Pauline asked. "Yes," Emily said. "He's still signed up." "Okay," Pauline exhaled. "Okay, just call me if it gets weird." "It's already weird." "Weirder, then." She didn't go online and read the thread. She knew her own limits, and reading 1,000 strangers discuss her was past one of them. Instead, she went for a run, 5 miles, her standard loop through the neighborhood west of the hospital, the one with the wide sidewalks and the park where the elderly couple she'd never spoken to but always waved at walked their ancient beagle every morning. They waved. She waved back. The beagle sniffed a fire hydrant with the focus of a professional. Normal. Everything very normal. She got back to her apartment, showered, ate a real breakfast for the first time in 2 days, and called the scheduling desk at Redstone General to confirm her Tuesday shift. She had a routine, and she was going to keep it. What she was not going to do was think too hard about the 23 seconds of video, or the comment thread, or the way Hale had looked at the wall after she'd walked him to the mat. She'd made her point without intending to make a point. She was done. Except she wasn't done, because at 1:15 on Saturday afternoon, her doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole first, a habit she hadn't broken since getting back stateside. A woman she didn't know, maybe mid-40s, standing on the front step with a kid beside her. A boy, maybe 9 or 10. The boy was holding a folded piece of paper with both hands the way kids hold things when they've been told to be careful with them. Emily opened the door. "Hi." The woman looked slightly embarrassed, slightly determined. The combination of someone who'd argued with themselves about coming here and the determined side had won. "I'm sorry to just show up. I got your address from Karen Pollard. She said she knew you from the hospital." She stopped. "I'm Diane Trust. This is my son, Owen." Emily looked at the boy. He was small for his age and had the particular stillness of kids who've learned to read rooms. "Hi, Owen," Emily said. "Hi," he said. Diane reached into her bag and pulled out a printed screenshot, blurry, clearly done on a home printer. The video. "I saw this morning. We were at Iron Ridge on Tuesday, too, in the folding chairs." She paused. "Owen used to love that class. He'd been going for 4 months." "Used to," Emily said. Diane looked at her son, and something passed between them that Emily recognized as the particular pain of a parent who'd watched their kid get hurt in a way that wasn't physical. "He quit 2 weeks ago. Hale was doing a demonstration, and he used Owen." She said it carefully, like the words had been rehearsed for precision. "He didn't hurt him, but he used him to show what bad form looked like, in front of everyone. Called him a perfect example of what not to do, and kept him up there for 5 minutes while everyone watched." Owen was looking at his shoes. "Owen's 9, Diane said. He cried in the car all the way home and hasn't wanted to go back since." Emily looked at the boy. She thought about Danny's face on Tuesday, the shoulders dropping when she'd nodded at him. She thought about the stick figure drawing on her refrigerator. "What's the paper?" Emily asked. Owen held it out. He'd written something on it, a kind of formal list, a kid's handwriting, slightly uneven. At the top it said, "Things Mr. Hale did that weren't okay," and there were 5 items below it. Emily took it and read it. She didn't rush. She read every item, and at the end she looked at Owen directly. "This took courage to write," she said. "Did you do this yourself?" "Yeah," he said. "Can I keep it?" He nodded. On Sunday, she got 2 more calls. One from a woman named Britt Kamara, whose daughter had been in the junior class for 6 months before Hale had told the girl, in front of her peers, that she was too slow to ever be serious about this. The girl was 11. The other call came from a man named James Sully, retired postal worker, who tried the adult class last spring, lasted 3 sessions, and quit after Hale had repeatedly made what he called fitness remarks about Sully's weight in front of the group. Emily wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a social worker. She wasn't sure what to do with the phone numbers and the stories accumulating on the notepad beside her kitchen phone. An actual paper notepad, the same one she used for grocery lists, now carrying the careful notes she'd written while listening to each person. She wasn't sure what doing something about it even looked like. What she was sure of was that she wasn't the first person Hale had targeted. She'd been convenient. She'd been in scrubs, which made her legible to him in a particular way, categorizable, safe to dismiss. The Tuesday session had been a controlled environment where he was the authority and she was a visitor, and that had been enough for him to make an example of her without worrying about the cost. He'd miscalculated the cost. By Monday morning, the video had 47,000 views and shared posts across 3 platforms she'd been told about secondhand. She still hadn't watched it again. A local news blogger who ran a Redstone community journalism site had reached out through Pauline asking if Emily would be willing to do an interview. Emily had said she'd think about it, which was her way of saying no while she figured out if it was actually no. She went to work Monday and did her job. The stroke patient from Friday had been transferred to step-down and was squeezing her husband's hand. The construction worker with the degloving injury was out of surgery and furious about the drain tube, and Emily spent 15 minutes with him explaining clearly what the drain was doing and what would happen without it, and he settled down. A pregnant woman came into triage with contractions 3 weeks early, and Emily stayed with her until the OB arrived because the woman's partner was stuck on the highway and she was scared, and sometimes that was the job. Not the clinical part, just the staying. She got home at 6:40 and found a note tucked under her apartment door. Plain white envelope, her name on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. She stood in the hallway for a moment before opening it. Inside, a single index card. You made a mistake on Friday. Some things don't stay on the mat. M. She read it twice. Then she went inside, locked the door, and sat down at her kitchen table. M. Marcus Hale. She was certain of it without being able to prove it. The handwriting was sharp and even, the kind of writing that had been taught with care, and the phrasing, "some things don't stay on the mat," had the rhythm of something said aloud first, tested, then written down. She set the card on the table and looked at it. She wasn't scared. That wasn't the word for it. It was something more precise, a heightened state of attention, the same thing that happened in her body when a patient's numbers started trending wrong and nothing was obviously the cause yet. The body reading the situation before the mind caught up. She took a photo of the card with her phone. Then she put it back in the envelope and put the envelope in the drawer under her utensils, behind the batteries and the takeout menus. She made dinner. She ate it standing at the counter because she was tired of sitting. She was watching the news with the volume low when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're planning. You should think about what it cost." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she added the number to her contacts under the name Unknown. Keep and set the phone down. She wasn't planning anything. That was the strange part. She was a nurse with a Tuesday shift and a nephew who wanted to learn martial arts and a list on a notepad next to her grocery list. She hadn't set out to expose anyone. She hadn't gone to Iron Ridge looking for a fight in any sense of the word. But she was beginning to understand that what had started on a blue foam mat on a Tuesday evening was not going to end quietly, because quiet endings required all parties to agree to them. And Marcus Hale had apparently decided that the 23 seconds of video and the 1,000-plus comment thread constituted something he needed to respond to. The question was, what responding looked like when you were a man who'd built your entire identity on being undefeatable. She found out Tuesday morning, 4 hours before Danny's class, when Pauline called her crying. "They're saying things about you," Pauline said. "Online. Hale's account. He has a dojo page. He posted something." "Pauline, slow down. What did he post?" She heard her sister taking a breath. "He posted a thing saying that the video was edited, that it was staged, that you came in already knowing what you were going to do because he's saying you had a friend record it on purpose, that it was a setup to discredit him." Another breath. "And he's saying that you've had complaints filed against you at the hospital, patient complaints. He's saying your nursing license has a disciplinary note on it." The kitchen was very quiet. "Is any of that true?" Pauline asked. "No," Emily said. A pause. "Emily, none of it is true, Pauline." She said it without heat, without defensiveness, the way she said things she was certain of. Her record at Redstone General was clean. Her license had no disciplinary action, had never had any disciplinary action. She knew this the way she knew her own name. What Hale had posted were lies. Clean, specific, verifiable lies about a real person with a real professional record. And he'd posted them to a page with 1,100 followers in a town where people knew who she was. She sat down at the kitchen table. She was going to need to talk to someone, not Pauline, not the journalism blogger, someone who understood what came next when a private person's professional reputation got put in the middle of a public fight they hadn't started. She picked up her phone and called a number she hadn't dialed in 2 years. It rang 4 times. "Voss?" said the voice on the other end. Clipped, alert, the tone of someone who answered the phone ready to work. "It's Carter," Emily said. "I have a situation." A pause. Then, "How bad?" Emily looked at the notepad on the table. Owen Trost's carefully written list, Diane's voice on the phone, James Sully's quiet, dignified anger, the index card in the drawer, the unknown number in her phone. "It started small," she said. "I don't think it stays that way." "Tell me." She told him. She started at the beginning, the Tuesday trial class, the mat, the laughing, and she went straight through to this morning, Pauline's call, the lies posted online, and she didn't editorialize or compress. She told it the way she wrote a clinical note. What happened, in order, without interpretation. When she finished, Voss was quiet for a moment. "You said his name is Hale." "Marcus Hale? Iron Ridge Martial Arts, Callaway Street, Redstone." "Okay." A pause. "Carter, I need you to listen to me. Don't respond to the post. Don't let anyone respond on your behalf. Don't go near that dojo until I say. Danny has class today. Cancel it. He's 8. I know how old he is. Cancel the class, Emily." She hated that he was right. She could feel herself hating it even as she registered that he was right, and the gap between those two things was narrow and uncomfortable. "Fine," she said. "I'm going to make some calls," Voss said. "There are people in Redstone who need to know what Hale just posted, and they need to hear it from the right direction." "Who are you calling?" "People who can verify things fast," Voss said. "And one person who's going to want to know that Marcus Hale just made a public claim about a licensed medical professional's record that he cannot back up." Emily thought about that. "Voss," she said, "I don't want this to become something I didn't start." "It already became that," he said. "You just hadn't noticed yet." He hung up. Emily sat at the table for a long moment. Through the window, she could see the street below. A Tuesday morning in Redstone, ordinary and gray, a delivery truck double parked, a woman walking a stroller with one hand and looking at her phone with the other. Her own phone buzzed. A new comment notification from the community board, forwarded by Pauline. Someone she'd never met, sharing Hale's post and adding their own caption. So the Army medic is actually a nurse with complaints on her record? Typical. Knew the video felt staged. 42 likes in 11 minutes. Emily put the phone down and looked at the notepad. Owen Trost's list, Diane's voice, Sully's quiet dignity, the index card in the drawer. She thought about what Voss had said. It already became that. She thought about the way Hale had looked at her on Tuesday. Not the moment she'd put him down, but before that. The casual certainty of someone for whom dismissal was so natural it didn't even register as a choice. She picked up the phone again. Not to respond. Not to post anything. She opened her contacts, found a number she'd added Sunday after the second phone call, and typed a text. "This is Emily Carter. I need to ask you something about what you saw at Iron Ridge the last 6 months. Not for social media. For documentation. Are you available to talk this week?" She sent it to James Sully. Then she sent a version of the same message to Diane Trost and to Britt Kamara. Then she sat back and waited, while somewhere across Redstone, Marcus Hale was doing whatever people did when they decided that the best response to being wrong was to make the truth expensive. Her phone lit up. Sully, responding within a minute. "I've been waiting for someone to ask." Sully's full name was James Aurelius Sully, and he had the kind of voice that made you feel like whatever he was about to say had been considered for a long time before he said it. He came to Emily's apartment Wednesday evening at 6, The way she'd asked. Not a coffee shop, not a public place, not somewhere that could be photographed. He sat at her kitchen table with his hands around a mug of coffee he'd barely touched and told her everything in the order it happened. And she wrote it down on the notepad with the same discipline she brought to clinical documentation. Dates where he had them, descriptions specific enough to be useful. The name of the other student who'd been present when Hale made the weight remarks, a woman named Petra who'd also quit the class and whom Sully had already texted. He didn't yell, Sully said. That's the thing that stuck with me. He said it like it was just observation. James, at your size, you're always going to telegraph the movement. Right in front of 4 other people. Like pointing out a defect in a piece of furniture. How many times? 3 sessions, different version each time. By the 3rd one, I didn't go back. He looked at his hands. I'm 61 years old. I've handled worse. But there's something about being made small in front of people who are watching to see how you take it. Emily understood that precisely. Diane Trost came Thursday morning before Emily's shift, Owen in tow because school was on a delayed start. Owen sat on the couch with a glass of juice and said almost nothing, but when Emily showed him where she'd put his list, in a plastic page protector, inside a folder, something in his face shifted in a way that was worth more than anything he could have said. Britt Kamara called Friday. She couldn't come in person. She worked 2 jobs, and her schedule was what it was. But she talked for 40 minutes, and Emily wrote 4 pages. Britt's daughter, Simone, was 11. The remark Hale had made about her being too slow to ever be serious had been in February, in front of 6 other students and 2 parents. Simone had cried in the bathroom after class and hadn't told her mother until 3 weeks later. She thought it was her fault, Britt said. An 11-year-old girl thought she'd somehow caused a grown man to publicly humiliate her. Emily stopped writing for a moment. She didn't. I know that. She knows it now. A pause. I need her to see that someone did something about it. By Friday evening, Emily had a folder with 9 pages of handwritten notes, 3 signed written statements she'd typed up, and had Sully, Diane, and Britt review and confirm, Owen's original list in its page protector, and photos of the index card and the screenshot of Hale's post that Pauline had forwarded. She called Voss. I've got documentation, she said. 3 formal statements, 1 from a minor through a parent, pattern behavior going back at least 8 months. What do I do with it? I talked to 2 people this week, Voss said. One of them is Redstone City Licensing. Whoever issued Iron Ridge's business and instructor certifications needs to know there are formal complaints. The other is a woman named Gail Mercer. She's with the State Athletic Commission, handles martial arts instructor certification. She wants to hear from you directly. When? She said this week if possible. Emily, the defamation post is the thing that changes this from a civil complaint into something with actual velocity. He made specific false claims about a licensed professional's record. That's not gray area. I know. Do you have someone to file the defamation piece? She didn't. She hadn't let herself think that far ahead, because thinking that far ahead felt like escalating, and she was still working out her own feelings about how much escalation she'd consented to when she'd walked into Iron Ridge with a workout bag and a taped finger. Not yet, she said. There's a woman, Renata Foss. She's a civil attorney here in Redstone. She does pro bono intake on reputational harm cases. I can send you her number. You've been busy, Emily said. You called me, Voss said. There was something in his voice that wasn't quite warmth, but was adjacent to it. The tone of someone who'd been in enough situations with her to skip the part where he explained why he was helping. She took Renata Foss's number. She left a voicemail Friday night and got a call back Saturday at 8 in the morning, which told her something about the attorney before they'd exchanged more than a greeting. What? Gail Mercer from the State Athletic Commission was a precise, unhurried woman who conducted the call like she was building something that needed to be structurally sound. She asked specific questions. She didn't editorialize. She asked Emily to send the documentation folder digitally and a hard copy by certified mail, and she confirmed that a formal complaint against an instructor's certification triggered a mandatory review process with a defined timeline. How long? Emily asked. 30 days for initial review. If the pattern documentation holds up and the statements are corroborated, We move to formal hearing. The instructor is notified and has the right to respond. A pause. Has he made any further contact with you directly? One note, 2 texts from an unknown number. Keep everything. Don't respond. If it continues, that's a separate matter, potentially harassment, which has its own filing path. Emily wrote harassment, separate path on the notepad. Ms. Carter, Mercer said, I want to be direct with you. The video, the pattern of complaints, and the false public statements about your professional record are 3 separate pressure points, and they're stronger together than individually. But this process takes time, and during that time, he still has an operating certification and a class schedule. I understand. Do you want to proceed? Yes, Emily said. She mailed the hard copy Monday morning on her way to work. Months. Tuesday came around again the way Tuesdays did, indifferent to whatever had happened in the days before it. Emily worked her shift, a full 12 hours, 2 codes, one of which they got back and one of which they didn't. A teenager with a forearm fracture who was calmer about it than his mother, an elderly woman with a UTI that had gone septic because she'd waited too long and hadn't wanted to be a bother, which was the thing that got under Emily's skin every time. The people who waited and waited because they didn't want to inconvenience anyone. She got off at 7 and drove to Iron Ridge. She hadn't canceled Danny's class. She hadn't been able to make herself do it, and she'd stopped trying to rationalize that decision and just accepted it. Voss had said to stay away from the dojo, and she'd agreed, and then she'd driven there anyway because Danny had asked 3 times if he was still going, and she'd said yes 3 times, and she wasn't going to unsay it. The parking lot had the usual Tuesday cars. She could see through the glass door that the kids' class was underway, Danny visible near the back, moving through a footwork drill with the focused frown he got when he was trying to do something right. She sat in the car. She wasn't going in. She was going to sit here until the class ended, and then she was going to collect Danny and drive home, and that was all. She was being the adult. She was exercising restraint. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Not the same unknown number from before. A different one. She answered it. Emily Carter? A man's voice. Young, a little uncertain. Who's this? My name is Trent Okafor. I'm a student at Iron Ridge, adults class. A pause. I was there Friday, when you came to spar. She waited. I was the one laughing, he said. On Tuesday, when he knocked you down. I was one of the people laughing. She remembered him. The guy in his 20s she'd noticed on Friday, the one who'd stopped moving and just watched. I saw the stuff he posted about you online, Trent said, about your record. I know that's not... I've been going there for 2 years, and I know what he does. The thing he said about your nursing license, I know that's not real because I have a cousin who's a nurse, and I looked up how licensing complaints actually work, and you can look them up. There's nothing on your record. I already checked. Another pause. I'm sorry for laughing. That's actually why I called. I'm sorry. Emily looked at the glass door of the dojo. Danny was still in his drill. Okay, she said. I want to give a statement, Trent said. If that helps anything. I saw what happened Friday, the real version, not whatever he's saying happened. It helps, she said. I'll have someone contact you this week about the format. Okay, he exhaled. Okay, good. Then, she's the girl who recorded it. She feels bad about posting without asking you. Her name's Naomi. She said if you want her to take it down, tell Naomi to leave it up, Emily said. A beat. Yeah? Yeah. She texted Voss about Trent Okafor from the car, while the parking lot filled with parents coming to collect their kids. When the kids' class broke up, and Danny came through the glass door with his bag over one shoulder, she got out of the car and waved. He ran to her. He was still in that age where running to someone wasn't self-conscious. We did a whole new block series, he said. Kovacs, that's the assistant instructor. She said my footwork is actually really good for a first weeker. That's because you pay attention, Emily said. Was Hale there? She'd been watching for that. I don't know. I was in the car. Danny looked up at her. He had Pauline's eyes, the same careful, reading look. Are you in trouble? No, she said. Is he? She put her hand on the back of his head, briefly, the way you do with kids when you don't want to make a moment too large or too small. Come on, your mom's making that rice thing you like. He accepted the redirect with the practiced ease of a kid who'd learned that adults changed the subject when they were deciding something important. The thing Hale did next was not something Emily had expected, which meant she'd underestimated him in one specific way. She'd assumed he would let the institutional process play out and manage his response through the same channels everyone else used. File a countercomplaint, issue a public statement, hire someone. What he did instead was show up at Redstone General on Wednesday. Not to cause a scene. That wasn't his style. She understood that now. His style was the controlled environment, the position of authority, the choice of terrain. He walked in through the main entrance at 2 in the afternoon, during the shift change when the lobby was at its most transitional, and he asked at the front desk for Emily Carter. He was told she was on shift and unavailable. He said he'd wait. The charge nurse on duty was a woman named Dolores, who had worked that desk for 16 years and had a specific gift for identifying situations before they fully formed. She looked at Marcus Hale, large, calm, watching the hallway with the focused patience of someone who had decided something, and she called Emily's cell. Emily was between patients. She looked at the message Dolores had sent and stood very still in the hallway for a moment. Then she called Voss. He's at the hospital, she said. Lobby, waiting. Don't engage, Voss said immediately. Don't go down there. This is exactly the kind of thing. I know what it is. Emily, I'm not going down there. I'm telling you because you need to know and because Dolores is alone at that desk. She could hear Voss processing. Does the hospital have security? Yes. Ask them to make a visible presence in the lobby. Don't have him removed unless he does something. That gives him a grievance. Just make sure he sees that people are watching. She relayed this to Dolores in a text. Dolores, who had navigated 16 years of emergency medicine and did not rattle, sent back a thumbs-up emoji and had Carl from hospital security doing a very natural-looking lobby walkthrough within 4 minutes. Hale waited for 40 minutes. Then he left. He didn't do anything. Didn't say anything to Dolores beyond his initial request. Didn't raise his voice or make demands. Just sat in the lobby chairs with his arms resting on his knees and then stood up and walked out. Which was worse than a scene in some ways. A scene was documentable. A man sitting quietly in a hospital lobby waiting for a nurse he had a dispute with was a man who understood exactly where the legal lines were and had no intention of crossing them visibly. Emily finished her shift. She walked out through the staff entrance on the east side of the building, the one that opened onto the parking structure, not the main lot. Old habit. She sat in her car and let herself feel the particular exhaustion of a day that had been hard in 2 completely different directions at once. The clinical hard and the personal hard, running simultaneously, drawing from the same reserve. Her phone buzzed. Renata Foss. I've reviewed the documentation you sent, the attorney said. I want to move on the defamation claim this week. The post is still up. He hasn't taken it down, which matters. And the longer it stays up, the cleaner the case. What does moving on it mean? A cease and desist first. Formal demand to remove the post and issue a correction with a response deadline. If he doesn't comply, we file. A brief pause. Ms. Carter, I want to ask you something directly. Is there anything in your professional history, anything at all, that he could use? Any complaint, any incident, any documentation that's ambiguous? Emily thought about it seriously, the way the question deserved. She thought about every patient she'd lost and whether she'd done everything she could. She thought about the times she'd been short with families because she was exhausted and the times she'd given a clinical opinion that turned out to be wrong. She thought about the harder cases, the ones in the field, before any of this, the decisions that got made in conditions that no debrief could fully account for. No, she said. Nothing that would hold up. Good, Renata said. I'll have the cease and desist out by Friday. The cease and desist went out Friday. By Saturday morning, Hale's post was still up. By Saturday afternoon, he'd added a comment below it. Stand by everything I said. Let them come. Emily read it on her phone, sent a screenshot to Renata, and made breakfast. What she wasn't prepared for was the community board post that appeared Saturday evening, not from Hale, but from a woman named Sandra Price, who identified herself as a longtime Iron Ridge parent. The post read, "I've known Marcus Hale for 4 years. He's dedicated his life to this community and to these kids. What's happening to him right now is a coordinated attack by someone who came into his dojo looking for a fight and is now using lawyers and social media to destroy a good man. Shame on you." 409 likes in 3 hours. Emily didn't read the comments. Pauline called and Emily didn't answer. She sat at the kitchen table with her notes and her folder and her documented statements, and she thought about the very specific mechanism by which a person with documentation and standing could still find themselves losing ground in a public conversation, because public conversations didn't operate on evidence. They operated on narrative, and the narrative of the wronged local institution was older and easier to reach for than the truth. She called Voss at 9 p.m. "He's not going to take the post down," she said. "I know." "Renata's going to file." "I know that too. Emily, there's something else." His voice had changed slightly, the same slight change she remembered from briefings that were about to get complicated. "I made a call this week to an old contact at Fort Bragg, trying to verify your service record, get something official we could put alongside the statements, make the whole picture harder to argue with." "Okay," she said slowly. "My contact flagged something. Your record has a designation on it. There's a classification note on a chunk of your third deployment. Not your whole record, just a portion." She was very still. "How much of a portion?" "The last 4 months," Voss said. "The contact says he can't access it without clearance he doesn't have. And when he tried to pull it through standard channels, the request bounced back with a flag from a unit designation I didn't recognize." The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The drawing on the refrigerator, stick figure in scrubs, red cross on the shirt, was softly lit by the under-cabinet light. Emily knew what the last 4 months of her third deployment contained. She knew it specifically in the way that things you carry for long enough become structural rather than incidental. They're not memories you return to, they're load-bearing. "Voss?" she said. "Yeah." "The unit designation, what was it?" He read it to her. She closed her eyes. That's not something I can talk about on this line," she said. "I know." A pause. "Carter, is there something coming that I should know about?" She opened her eyes, looked at the folder on the table. Owen Trost's list in its page protector. Sully's careful, precise recounting. Britt Camara's voice on the phone. "I need her to see that someone did something about it." "Someone's going to come," she said. "Not because of Hale. Because of what you just triggered when that request bounced." "Who?" "I don't know exactly," she said. "But whoever responds to flags on that unit designation, they're not going to call first." 3 hours later, at 12:14 in the morning, a black SUV with government plates and no visible agency markings pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building and sat there with the engine running. Emily was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table, and she saw the headlights from her window. She didn't move for a long moment, just looked at the light pooling in the parking lot and thought about the last 4 months of her third deployment and the things that had happened in them, and the people who had reasons to want those things to stay exactly as classified as they currently were. Then someone knocked on her door. 3 knocks. Measured. Not urgent, not aggressive. The kind of knock that communicates we can do this quietly or we don't have to. Emily crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, stopped at the door, and looked through the peephole. 2 people, a man and a woman, both in dark civilian clothes. Not suits, not uniforms. The specific non-clothing of people who wanted to look like nothing in particular. The man was maybe 50, broad through the jaw, standing slightly back and to the right the way someone stands when they're letting the other person take point, but haven't actually relinquished control. The woman was younger, mid-30s, and she was the one who'd knocked. She was holding a folded credential case in her left hand, visible, deliberate. Emily unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door. "Emily Carter," the woman said. Not a question. "My name is Agent Dara Wiley. This is Agent Rourke. We're with a Federal Interagency Task Coordination Unit." She opened the credential case. Emily looked at it. The ID was real. She'd seen enough federal IDs to know what real looked like. "We'd like to come in." "It's after midnight," Emily said. "Yes," Wiley said. "It is." Emily stepped back and let them in. They moved through her apartment the way trained people move through unfamiliar spaces. Not invasively, not dramatizing anything, just taking in the geometry of the room with the automatic efficiency of people for whom reading an environment was as natural as breathing. Wiley sat at the kitchen table without being invited. Rourke stayed near the hallway, weight on his back foot. Emily sat across from Wiley and waited. "You made a request," Wiley said, "through a contact at Fort Bragg to access a portion of your service record from your third deployment." "My contact made the request," Emily said, "on my behalf." "The request flagged a compartmentalized unit designation," Wiley said, "which triggered a protocol review." She set her credential case on the table and folded her hands over it. "We're not here about Marcus Hale." "I know," Emily said. Something shifted in Wiley's expression. Not surprise, more like recalibration. "How much do you know about why we're here?" "The unit designation Voss read me is associated with a joint operation from my third deployment, the last 4 months of it. That operation, the parts of it that overlap with my service record, are classified at a level that doesn't get accessed through standard channels without triggering exactly what just happened." Emily kept her voice even. "So someone saw the request, ran my name, and decided to come talk to me in person at midnight to find out what I'm doing." Rourke from the hallway. "What are you doing?" "Trying to prove I'm a competent nurse with a clean record," Emily said. "Somebody posted lies about me online. I'm building documentation to correct them." Wiley and Rourke exchanged a look that lasted less than a second. "The situation with Hale," Wiley said. "Yes." "Walk me through it." She said it the way clinicians said things. No preamble, no softening, just the request and the expectation that it would be honored. Emily walked them through it, start to finish, the same sequence she'd told Voss, except shorter. She'd told it enough times now that she knew which pieces were structural and which were detail, and she gave them the structure. Wiley took notes on a small pad. Rourke didn't move. When she finished, Wiley set down her pen. "The portion of your record that's classified," she said. "Did you tell anyone what's in it?" "No." "Did you indicate to anyone that there was classified material associated with your service?" "No." "I told Voss the record existed. I didn't tell him what it contained." "Does Hale know anything about your third deployment beyond what's in your general service record?" "He doesn't know anything about any of my deployments," Emily said. "He thought I was a nurse who'd done some basic field medic training. That was the whole point." Wiley was quiet for a moment. Then, "Ms. Carter, the operation associated with that classification note, the concern isn't that you've said something. The concern is that a request touching that classification got logged into a system, and that system has a record of the inquiry, and that record has your name on it. In the current environment, that creates a thread." "What kind of thread?" "The kind that people pull," Rourke said from the hallway. Emily looked at him. He was watching her with the flat, assessing look of someone deciding how much to say. "We're not here to threaten you," Wiley said, and she said it without defensiveness, just as information. "We're here because the protocol requires a face-to-face when this flag fires, and because we needed to assess the situation directly before deciding how to handle the inquiry in the system." "How are you going to handle it?" "That depends on what you need," Wiley said. Emily hadn't expected that. She sat with it for a moment. "I need my professional record to be publicly verifiable," she said. "Hale posted specific false claims about a nursing license disciplinary note. I need documentation that my record is clean, in a form that can be used in a civil proceeding." "That we can do," Wiley said. "A letter from the state licensing board confirming no disciplinary action, coordinated so it doesn't touch the classified portion. And the request Voss put through?" "We'll handle that on our end," Rourke said. "The thread gets closed." "Meaning?" "Meaning it goes nowhere," he said. "The inquiry gets logged as resolved. No further activity." Emily looked at him steadily. "I need to know you're not closing it in a way that hurts Voss." "We're not interested in Voss," Wiley said. "I need to know that." "You have my word," Wiley said. And something in the way she said it, not performative, not bureaucratic, just direct, made Emily believe her. They left at 1:15 in the morning. Emily listened to the SUV pull out of the lot, then sat at the table for a while in the quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The stick figure drawing held its position on the door. She made herself go to sleep. She had a shift in 6 hours, and sleep was not optional. It was clinical necessity. She'd learned that lesson in a tent outside a forward operating base when she'd been awake for 32 hours and made a dosage calculation she'd had to recheck 3 times because her hands weren't entirely sure what her brain was asking them to do. She set her alarm and closed her eyes and slept badly and completely, which was the only way she knew how. The letter from the State Nursing Licensing Board arrived digitally on Monday, coordinated as promised. Clean, official, time-stamped, confirming 0 disciplinary actions on Emily Carter's record, past or present. Renata Foss had it filed as an exhibit in the defamation case by Monday afternoon. Tuesday morning, Hale's post was still up. His comment below it, "Stand by everything I said," had collected another 112 likes since the weekend. Tuesday afternoon, the Redstone City Business Licensing Office received formal complaints from 3 independent parties regarding Iron Ridge Martial Arts and its head instructor. The complaints cited documented pattern behavior, witness statements, and the pending State Athletic Commission review. Emily didn't file any of those complaints herself. Sully filed one. Britt Camara filed one. The third came from Trent Okafor, who'd looked up the procedure on his own and done it without telling anyone. Emily found out about Trent's complaint when Renata forwarded her the city licensing office's acknowledgement email, which had been CC'd to all 3 complainants. She sat with it for a moment, the image of a 20-something guy in a martial arts class looking up a formal complaint procedure and doing it because he felt like he owed her something for laughing 3 weeks ago. People did unexpected things. She'd spent her entire career watching people do unexpected things, small terrible things, and small extraordinary things, often in the same shift, sometimes in the same room. She texted Trent, "I heard what you did. Thank you." He wrote back 20 minutes later, "Least I could do." Probably literally. She almost smiled. The Athletic Commission's formal review notification went to Iron Ridge on Wednesday. It was a standard letter. No accusations in the language, just the procedural fact of a review having been opened, the timeline, and the requirement that Hale respond within 21 days. Standard, bureaucratic, the kind of document that looked like nothing from the outside. What it meant in practice was that Hale now knew the complaint had teeth. He'd known about the community board chatter. He'd known about the defamation filing. Renata's cease and desist had reached him 8 days ago, and he'd ignored it, which was now an exhibit in its own right. But the Athletic Commission review was a different category of problem. His instructor certification was the foundation of everything. The dojo, the income, the identity. Without it, Iron Ridge wasn't a martial arts school. It was a room with mats. He took the post down on Wednesday evening. No explanation, no correction, no acknowledgement, just gone. The "stand by everything I said" comment gone with it. The entire thread, 1,100 responses and 4 days of public record, deleted. Renata texted Emily. He took it down. Doesn't matter. We have the screenshots and they're already filed. It's actually better for us that he deleted it without issuing a correction. Shows consciousness of guilt. Emily read the text in the break room at Redstone General, between a catheter change and a family conference. She put her phone back in her pocket and went to do the family conference. What she hadn't accounted for was Sandra Price. Sandra Price, the woman who'd posted the coordinated attack message on the community board, the one that had gotten 409 likes in 3 hours, turned out to be more than a longtime Iron Ridge parent. Renata found out through the city licensing complaint process that Price's husband, Dale Price, was one of 3 silent investors in Iron Ridge Martial Arts, LLC, had been since the dojo opened 6 years ago. Renata called Emily on Thursday morning with the information in the flat, careful tone of someone delivering a piece of intelligence they want you to understand fully before you react to it. So her post wasn't just community loyalty, Emily said. Her post was protecting a financial investment, Renata said, which makes it something other than a private citizen's opinion. Does it change the case? It adds a layer. If the dojo faces civil liability, the LLC structure means the investors have exposure, which means Sandra Price and Dale Price have personal interest in the outcome. A pause. It also means that when you file against Iron Ridge Martial Arts, LLC, and not just Marcus Hale individually. Emily thought about that. The other students, Sully, Diane, Britt, do they have standing to join a filing? Potentially. That's a conversation I want to have with each of them separately. Renata's voice shifted slightly. Ms. Carter, I want to make sure you understand what this is becoming. It started as a defamation claim. With the pattern documentation, the investor connection, and the commission review, it's becoming a case that has real financial and reputational consequences for multiple parties. Hale, the LLC, and by extension, the Prices. Good, Emily said. That's not a word I'd have expected from you. I'm not doing this for revenge, Emily said. But consequences aren't the same as revenge. They're just what happens when the evidence is accurate. Renata was quiet for a moment. I'll be honest with you. I didn't take this case because I thought it was going to be complicated. I took it because what he posted was textbook defamation, and I thought it would settle fast. It's not settling fast. No, Emily agreed. Are you prepared for it to go the distance? I've been prepared for things to go the distance since I was 22 years old, Emily said. This is considerably less difficult than most of them. Yeah. The community board post from Sandra Price was still up. Unlike Hale's, she hadn't taken it down. Renata sent her a cease and desist on Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, Price took down her post and published a new one. I have been asked by my attorney to clarify that my previous post expressed a personal opinion and was not intended to make factual claims about anyone's professional record. I wish all parties well. 40 minutes after that post went up, a woman named Gloria Fenn, a parent Emily had never spoken to, whose son had been in Danny's Tuesday Kids class for 2 years, posted directly beneath it. This is not the time for wish all parties well. Sandra, you know exactly what Marcus Hale has been doing in that dojo. Some of us were too scared to say anything. Emily Carter wasn't. The least we can do is stop pretending this is complicated. The thread under Gloria Fenn's comment accumulated 87 responses in 2 hours. Emily didn't read them. She found out about Gloria Fenn's post from Pauline, who sent a screenshot with a single line of text beneath it. People are paying attention. They're dumb. The city licensing office completed its preliminary review on Monday, faster than standard timelines, which Renata noted without surprise. 3 independent complaints with documented supporting materials tended to move things. The preliminary finding was that Iron Ridge Martial Arts had sufficient complaint basis to warrant a full operational review, which meant a city inspector would conduct an on-site visit within 15 business days, and Hale would be required to provide student safety documentation, incident logs, and any prior complaint records. The requirement to produce prior complaint records was the piece that mattered most, because Emily knew from Sully and Diane and Britt that there had been prior complaints. Informal ones, parents who'd called the front desk, one who'd written an email, Sully, who'd said something directly to Hale before quitting. Whether those complaints had been documented or quietly discarded was something the city inspector was now going to find out. Hale knew this too. Whatever his read on the situation had been a week ago, that he could outlast the social media moment, that the community support would absorb the formal complaints, that the defamation filing was a bluff. The city inspection notice changed the calculation. He called Iron Ridge's parent class on Monday evening and addressed it directly, which was the first time he'd said anything publicly about the situation in a room he could control. 3 of the parents in attendance had kids with ties to people who knew Emily. One of them, a man named Gordo Villanueva, whose daughter was in the junior class and whose wife played on the same recreational volleyball team as Diane Trust, had his phone in his pocket with the audio recording app running. He sent the audio file to Diane. Diane sent it to Emily. Emily sent it to Renata. Hale had told the parents that the complaints were coming from one person with a grievance and that the situation was being handled. He said the inspection was routine and that Iron Ridge had nothing to hide. He said Emily Carter had come into this dojo looking for a confrontation and had found lawyers when she couldn't find anything else. He said all of this calmly, in his instructor's voice, in a room where parents trusted him with their children twice a week. Renata listened to the audio file and called Emily. "He just gave us a gift," she said. "He made more false public statements," Emily said, "in front of 12 witnesses on audio after receiving a cease and desist." A pause. "Emily, he is not a stupid man, but he is a man who has operated for a long time without anyone pushing back hard enough to cost him anything. He doesn't know how to adjust for actual consequences yet." "He'll learn," Emily said. "By then it'll be too late." Voss showed up at her apartment Tuesday evening unannounced, which was something he did when he'd decided that a phone call wasn't sufficient. He was 53 years old, former military intelligence, currently a private security consultant, and the kind of man who took up exactly as much space as he needed, and never more. He'd served one rotation alongside Emily's unit during her second deployment, and they'd maintained the kind of contact that didn't require frequency to stay current. The occasional call, the reliable response. He sat at her kitchen table with coffee and looked at the folder she'd assembled, which had grown to 31 pages. "You've been busy," he said. "People kept giving me things." He turned pages without rushing, stopped at Owen Trost's list, still in its page protector. "Read it fully. Set it down." "The commission review," he said. "How long does the process actually take?" Mercer said 30 days for initial review, then a formal hearing if the pattern holds. "And the civil filing?" "Renata wants to file formally next week. She's already got the complaint drafted." Voss nodded slowly. "The agents, Wiley and Rourke, they said the thread was closed." "Yes." "Do you believe them?" Emily thought about it honestly. "I believe Wiley," she said. "Rourke I can't read completely, but yes, I think what they needed was to assess the situation and close the loop. And the situation is ordinary enough that there's no reason for them to leave it open." Voss accepted that. "There's one more thing," he said. She waited. "I made some inquiries, separate from the Bragg request, nothing that touched the classified material, about Hale's background, just professional history." He set down his coffee. "Before Iron Ridge, he ran a combatives program at a private security firm in Phoenix for 3 years. The firm dissolved. I found 2 former employees who said the firm had internal disciplinary actions against Hale for conduct with female staff. Nothing criminal, but documented internally." Emily was quiet. "Those former employees," she said, "would they talk to Renata?" "One of them already said yes." She looked at the folder on the table, 31 pages and now something more. Not just a pattern in redstone, a pattern with a history, with a geography, with a paper trail that predated Iron Ridge and everything in it. "He built the same environment twice," she said. "At minimum," Voss said. "Maybe more. I only went back as far as Phoenix." She thought about Sandra Price's carefully worded retraction. "I wish all parties well." She thought about the LLC structure, the investor exposure, the city inspection, the audio file from the parent meeting, Owen Trost's list in its page protector. She thought about Britt Camara's voice. "I need her to see that someone did something about it. All of it was true and documented and in the right hands. And Marcus Hale still had his certification, still had his class schedule, still had his keys to Iron Ridge and his name on the sign and the particular authority that came from being the person in the room who everyone assumed had the right to be in charge. That was going to change. She could feel the shape of how it was going to change. The commission review, the civil filing, the Phoenix employment history, the audio from Monday's parent meeting. It was going to change because the documentation was solid and the process was working and the truth was not, in this case, complicated. But it hadn't changed yet. But Wednesday, she went back to work. 12-hour shift, the standard texture of it. 2 admissions through triage, a post-surgical patient in Bay 2 who was trying to unhook her own IV because she needed to use the bathroom and hadn't wanted to bother anyone, a man in his 70s with chest pain that turned out to be musculoskeletal, and who was so relieved he cried a little and apologized for crying, which Emily told him was completely unnecessary. At 4 in the afternoon, she was in the supply room doing a cart restock when Dolores appeared in the doorway. "There's someone in the lobby," Dolores said. Not Hale. A woman. She asked for you by name and said it's not medical. Emily looked up. What's her name? Naomi Birch. The name landed. She'd heard it. Trent Okafor on the phone, the girl who recorded it. Her name's Naomi. The student who'd filmed 23 seconds on a Friday night and started something she probably hadn't fully anticipated starting. Tell her I'll be down in 10 minutes, Emily said. Naomi Birch was 24 and looked younger. She was sitting in the lobby with her hands in her jacket pockets and the expression of someone who'd talked herself into coming here 4 times and was now committed before the 5th talkout. She stood up when Emily came through the hallway door. I'm sorry to come to your work, she said immediately. It's okay. You want coffee? There's a machine. No, thank you. She sat back down when Emily sat. I wanted to apologize in person for posting the video without asking you. I told Trent to tell you to leave it up. I know, but I didn't ask first. She looked at her hands. I posted it because I was angry. He'd been pulling that kind of thing for a long time, and I was angry, and you seemed like you didn't know what just happened, and I wanted people to see. She looked up. I didn't think about what it might do to your life. That wasn't fair. Emily looked at her. How long had you been at Iron Ridge? 14 months? Did he do anything to you directly? Naomi was quiet for a moment. Not the way he did with you, or Sully, from what I've heard. He never targeted me personally, but I watched him do it to other people for a year and I kept going back anyway, which is its own thing I've been thinking about. A pause. I gave a statement to the attorney, the one handling your case. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay, Emily said. Naomi, the video isn't why this situation became what it became. It helped. But the documentation, the witnesses, the pattern, that's what's going to matter. You lit the match, but the material was already there. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. He told the parents on Monday that you came looking for a fight. I know. I was in that class for 14 months, Naomi said. I know who came looking for what, Sam. Thursday evening, Renata filed the civil complaint. Iron Ridge Martial Arts, LLC, Marcus Hale individually, and Sandra and Dale Price as investors, named, served, on the record. Defamation, professional harm, pattern of conduct, supporting exhibits including the audio from Monday's parent meeting, which Renata had determined was legally recorded under state single-party consent law. The filing was a matter of public record, which meant the Redstone Community Board knew about it by Friday morning. Gloria Fenn posted the case number and a link to the court filing system. Sandra Price's I Wish All Parties Well post got 300 additional comments. The blogger who'd asked Emily for an interview 2 weeks ago published a summary of the filing with links to the public documents, which meant the story was no longer just in community group threads. It was reported. Hale issued a statement through an attorney Friday afternoon. 2 paragraphs. He denied all claims, expressed confidence in the outcome of any review process, and stated that Iron Ridge remained open and operational, and that the instructor certification remained valid, which it did. Still valid, still operational. Saturday morning, Emily's phone rang at 7:15. She answered before checking the number. Ms. Carter, Gail Mercer, the Athletic Commission, on a Saturday morning. I apologize for the hour. Something has come up in the review that I wanted to discuss with you directly before I speak to anyone else. Emily sat up in bed. What kind of something? We sent Hale's certification history to our compliance team as part of the standard review process, Mercer said. Our compliance officer ran his background through the National Instructor Registry, a database that tracks certification applications and renewals across state lines. The room was quiet. He had a certification in Arizona, Mercer said. Phoenix, under a different first name, Michael, not Marcus. The certification was suspended in Arizona 4 years ago following a conduct complaint from a private security firm. He allowed the suspension to finalize, waited 2 years, and then applied for a new certification in Colorado under Marcus, his middle name, with a modified application that did not disclose the Arizona suspension. Emily was completely still. He didn't just have a history, she said. He hid it, Mercer said. Specifically and deliberately. A non-disclosed prior suspension is a grounds for immediate revocation of his current certification and a permanent bar from recertification in Colorado. What I need from you is confirmation that the Phoenix information you may have access to through whatever channels you used is something you'd be willing to formalize. Voss, Emily said. His name is Voss. He has names of former employees. Can you give me a number for him today? Yes, Emily said. I can give you a number right now. She gave Mercer the number. Mercer thanked her with the brisk efficiency of someone who already had the next call queued up and hung up. Emily sat on the edge of her bed in the early morning quiet, the sun not fully up yet, the street outside her window just beginning to fill with the first sounds of a Saturday. Somewhere in Redstone, Marcus Hale was waking up on a morning where his certification was still valid, his dojo was still open, his name was still on the sign, and he still believed that the situation was manageable. He hadn't been told yet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Voss, unprompted, as if he'd somehow known the call was coming. Mercer just called me. I'm talking to her at 9. This is ending. Emily set the phone on the nightstand and sat there for a moment with her hands on her knees. She thought about the index card in the drawer. Some things don't stay on the mat. And the unknown number texts, and the black SUV in the parking lot, and the 14 months Naomi Birch had watched something wrong happen and not known what to do about it. And Owen Trost's list in careful, uneven handwriting, 5 items, titled at the top in a 9-year-old's best attempt at precision. She thought about Simone Camara, 11 years old, crying in a bathroom and thinking it was her fault. She got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with the folder. 31 pages, now supplemented with Renata's filing confirmation and Mercer's call notes, which she wrote out longhand while they were still fresh. Page 33. She wrote the date at the top. Wrote Mercer call took. Saturday, a.m. Wrote what had been said, in order, without interpretation. Then she stopped writing and looked at what she had. It was enough. She knew it was enough. The documentation was solid, the process was working, Mercer had the Arizona information, Renata had the filing, the audio from Monday's parent meeting was in the court record. It was enough, and it was going to land. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't know until Monday morning, when Renata called her at 8:15 with a voice that sounded like someone who'd just learned something they hadn't been expecting, was that Marcus Hale had filed his own emergency motion Friday evening just before the courthouse closed. He was countersuing Emily for defamation. And he'd listed, as a primary witness, someone whose name Emily didn't recognize until Renata said it twice, a name that meant nothing to her, from a deployment she'd never discussed with anyone in Redstone, from a portion of her record that was supposed to be completely inaccessible. The name was Warren Tull. Renata said it twice, and on the second time Emily's hand tightened around the phone without her consciously deciding to do that. I don't know that name, Emily said. He's listed as a former colleague from your 3rd deployment. The motion claims he has direct knowledge of conduct issues during your service. The language is vague, intentionally so, but it implies professional misconduct during a field operation. Emily stood at her kitchen window and looked at the street below without seeing it. She was running the 3rd deployment through her memory in the disciplined way she'd learned to do. Not emotionally, not with the full weight of what it had cost, just sequentially. Names, faces, positions. The last 4 months specifically, the classified portion, the people she'd worked alongside in conditions that no formal record would ever fully describe. Warren Tull. She got there eventually. Not a name she'd used often, not someone she'd known well. A contractor, not military, not medical. Attached to the operation in a logistical capacity she'd never been fully briefed on. She'd interacted with him maybe 4 times. He'd made her uncomfortable in the specific way that certain men made certain women uncomfortable in isolated environments. Not anything she'd reported, because in those conditions the threshold for what constituted reportable was set very high, and she'd been busy keeping people alive. He's a contractor, she said. Private. He was attached to the operation, but not military. I knew him by sight. Does he have anything on you? No, Emily said. And then because Renata needed precision, not reassurance. Nothing that happened during that deployment involved misconduct on my part. What he could claim, I don't know what he's been told to claim, or by who. Renata was quiet for a moment. The motion was filed by Hale's attorney Friday evening. The timing is notable. He filed the countersue the same day Mercer called you about the Arizona certification. Emily thought about that. He found out about the certification review before it went official. Someone told him, Renata said, either someone inside the commission or someone who heard about it through one of the complaint channels. He knew the certification was going to be revoked, and he filed before it happened so he could claim he's the one being persecuted. And Warren Tull. Tull is the weapon, Renata said. Hale may not know what's actually in your record, but he knows there's classified material, which means he knows there's something he can point at without being able to be disproved. Because if it's classified, you can't refute it publicly. Emily sat down at the kitchen table. He's not using what's in the record. He's using the existence of the record. Yes, the implication alone is enough to muddy the water. A pause. Emily, I need you to tell me, is there any version of what Tull could claim that contains a kernel of truth that could be shaped into something damaging? She thought about this seriously. She owed Renata that. There was one field decision during the classified period, she said carefully. Triage call, multiple casualties, limited resources. I made a call about treatment priority that I stand behind completely. The person who didn't get prioritized survived, but the call itself, in the wrong framing, described without context, it could be made to sound like I chose who mattered and who didn't. Could it? Everything in combat medicine can be made to sound like that, Emily said. That's what triage is. You work the math in real time with incomplete information, and you do your best, and people live and people die, and you go to sleep and get up and do it again. Renata was quiet for a long moment. I need a day, she said. Don't talk to anyone about Tull, not Voss, not Pauline, no one. She called Voss anyway. She knew she was going to before she'd finished the call with Renata, and she made herself wait 20 minutes before she did it, mostly to honor the spirit of the request even while violating the letter of it. Tull, she said when Voss answered. A pause. Say the name again. Warren Tull. He's listed in Hale's countersue as a witness with knowledge of my third deployment. A longer pause this time. Warren Tull was not military. No, contractor. What's he claiming? Nothing specific yet. The motion is a framework. It implies misconduct without specifying it, enough to slow things down, maybe enough to shift the public narrative back. Voss exhaled slowly. Hale found him. Or Tull found Hale. Or someone connected them. Emily set her elbow on the table and pressed 2 fingers to the space between her eyebrows. Voss, do you know something about Tull I should know? Another pause. This one had a different texture. I know that the operation your last 4 months were attached to had some private contractors whose conduct was reviewed afterward, Voss said. I know that at least one contractor was separated from that operation for cause. I don't know if Tull was one of them. Find out, Emily said. Emily, I know. I know what I'm asking. She dropped her hand from her face and looked at the table. If Tull has a record of his own from that operation and Hale's attorney doesn't know about it, then he's not a weapon. He's a liability. But I need to know what we're working with. Give me until tomorrow morning, Voss said. She gave him until tomorrow morning. She cooked dinner, which she almost never did on weekdays, because she needed something that required her hands and produced something tangible. Rice, vegetables, piece of salmon she'd had in the freezer since whenever. She ate it standing at the counter and then washed the pan and stood in the kitchen with clean hands and let herself feel the particular weight of the situation in full, not managing it, not processing it into action items, just feeling it. It was heavy. That was the honest answer. She was tired in a way that went past the physical, tired of being the person who kept having to prove things that shouldn't have required proof. She'd proven it in the dojo. She'd proven it with the documentation. She was now going to have to prove it again, in a different arena, against a claim that couldn't be directly refuted because it was designed not to be. She thought about Simone Camara crying in a bathroom, thought about Owen Tross's 5-item list, thought about the construction worker with the drain tube who'd settled down when she explained it clearly, and the elderly woman with the sepsis who'd waited too long because she hadn't wanted to be a bother. She wasn't going anywhere. Dumped. Voss called at 7:15 Tuesday morning. Warren Tull was separated from the operation in month 3 of the classified period, he said, and his voice had the particular flatness of someone delivering information they've confirmed from multiple sources. The separation was for cause, specifically, unauthorized disclosure of operational details to personnel outside the security perimeter. He was removed, his clearance was pulled, and he signed a non-disclosure agreement as a condition of avoiding formal prosecution. Emily was very still. He signed an NDA, she said. A comprehensive one. If he makes any public statement about that operation, including testimony in a civil proceeding, he's in breach. And the NDA has teeth. The party that drafted it has the resources to enforce it. Hale's attorney doesn't know about the NDA. Hale's attorney found a contractor with a grudge and a connection to your classified record and thought he'd found a key, Voss said. He didn't know what the lock actually was. Emily let out a breath. Does Wiley know about this? I think Wiley is about to know about this, Voss said carefully, because the moment Tull's name appears in a public court filing referencing that operation, the people who drafted that NDA are going to have a very strong interest in making sure he doesn't testify. They'll move to block his testimony. Before the end of the week, Voss said, without Emily Carter having to do a single thing. She sat with that for a moment. The architecture of it was almost elegant in the impersonal way that systems operated when all the pieces landed in the right configuration. Hale had reached for a weapon and grabbed something that was about to detonate in his own attorney's hands. Voss, she said, thank you. Don't thank me, he said. Just finish it. Renata had arrived at the same conclusion independently by Tuesday afternoon after her own research into the contractor separation records that were accessible through the court system's discovery process. She called Emily at 4 with the tone of someone who'd been running and had just seen the finish line. His attorney filed a witness who is under a binding NDA that prohibits exactly the testimony they've listed him for, Renata said. I'm filing a motion to exclude Tull's testimony by end of day. When the NDA surfaces in the proceeding, and it will, because the drafting party will intervene, Hale's countersue loses its only novel element. What happens to the countersue without Tull? It becomes a defamation claim with no supporting evidence from someone who is actually present, Renata said. His attorney can argue that you damaged Hale's reputation by documenting things that happened, which is not defamation, that's just documentation. A pause. The countersue doesn't survive the week, Emily. She said it with professional certainty, not performance. Renata Voss was not a dramatic woman. She was precise and prepared, and she didn't make claims she hadn't earned. Emily believed her completely. What about the certification? Emily asked. Mercer's office is moving fast. The Arizona non-disclosure is a hard violation. There's no interpretation where it isn't. I expect the revocation to be formalized by end of the week. And the civil case? Still active. The countersue will be dismissed. Our case proceeds. But Emily, Renata paused. I want to talk to you about something. The other plaintiffs, Sully, the Trost family, Britt Kamara, they have individual claims that I think are stronger now that the pattern is fully documented and the Phoenix history is on the record. I'd like to recommend they each retain counsel and pursue their own cases, with this documentation as the foundation. They should, Emily said immediately, use everything I have, whatever helps them. I thought you'd say that. They were there before I was, Emily said. This was already happening. I just showed up at the right moment. The certification revocation came through Thursday. Gail Mercer called Emily directly at 9 in the morning, not required, purely a courtesy, and read her the official language. Marcus Hale's Colorado instructor certification was revoked with immediate effect, grounds being deliberate non-disclosure of a prior suspension in Arizona. He was permanently barred from recertification in Colorado, and the revocation would be reported to the National Instructor Registry, which covered 43 states. He can appeal, Mercer said. He has 30 days. Will it succeed? The non-disclosure was deliberate and documented, Mercer said. No, it won't succeed. Emily thanked her and sat for a moment after the call ended. Iron Ridge was still physically open. The building, the mats, the sign on Callaway Street. But without a certified instructor, it couldn't operate as a martial arts school. The LLC investors, the prices, would have to either find a certified replacement or close. Renata had confirmed that the civil case created enough liability exposure that the investors were already in conversation with their own attorneys about settlement. By Thursday afternoon, a notice appeared on Iron Ridge's social media page. Brief, unsigned, in the flat language of legal counsel. Iron Ridge Martial Arts will be temporarily suspended pending administrative review. Current class enrollments will be refunded in full. We apologize for the inconvenience. 13 minutes after that post went up, Gloria Fenn posted a screenshot of it on the community board with the caption, "Temporarily suspended." This is what accountability looks like when people don't give up. The comment thread ran to 400 responses before Emily stopped having it reported to her. Hale's countersue was dismissed Friday morning. Renata texted the case number and the single word, dismissed. Emily was between patients at Redstone General, standing in the hallway with a chart she'd been about to open. She read the text and stood there for a moment, and then she opened the chart and went to see her patient. The countersue's dismissal didn't make the news the way the initial video had. There was no 23-second clip of it, no shareable moment, no image. It was a court document filed in a county system at 9:47 a.m. on a Friday, and it simply said that the claim lacked merit and was dismissed without prejudice to refile, which Renata had told her was standard language that meant nothing because Hale had nothing left to refile with. The community board knew about it by noon. By early afternoon, Trent Okafor had posted a brief characteristic response. Court dismissed Hale's countersue this morning. Per my previous comment from 3 weeks ago, least he could do. Naomi Birch liked the post. So did Owen Trost's mother. The settlement meeting happened the following Tuesday, 11 days after Renata filed the civil complaint. Emily hadn't been sure it would settle. Renata had been cautiously optimistic. The investor exposure, the revocation, the dismissed countersue, the Phoenix employment history all pointed toward a party that had run out of defensible positions and knew it. But settlement required the other side to accept that, and acceptance wasn't always rational. It was rational this time. Dale and Sandra Price attended through their attorney. Hale's civil attorney attended. Hale himself was not present, which Renata had predicted. The absent defendant was usually someone who'd been told the settlement terms were acceptable and had decided that watching them formalized in person was more than he could manage. The terms were documented and signed before noon. Iron Ridge Martial Arts LLC would issue a formal written public apology to Emily Carter, acknowledging that the defamatory posts contained false statements about her professional record and that the statements had been made without factual basis. The apology would be published on the dojo's social media page, the Redstone Community Board, and submitted to the court as part of the settlement record. Emily received a financial settlement she was not permitted to disclose an amount, which was fine. The number wasn't the point, and never had been. Hale was personally enjoined from making any public or private statements about Emily Carter's professional or military record, and the LLC formally acknowledged the pattern of conduct complaints from Sully, Trost, Kamara, and 2 additional complainants who'd come forward after the civil filing became public, with documentation submitted to the court record that Sully and the others could use in their individual proceedings. Renata slid the signed documents across the table toward Emily. Emily looked at them for a moment. 31 pages in the original folder. This was 4 pages, signed, witnessed, dated. Less paper than the documentation that built it. That was always how it went. The work was enormous, and the resolution was a signature. She picked up the pen and signed. Right. The public apology went up on Friday afternoon. It was 3 paragraphs drafted by the LLC's attorney and vetted by Renata to ensure every false statement was specifically retracted. The first paragraph named Emily Carter directly and stated that prior posts containing claims about her nursing license were false, that her professional record contained no disciplinary actions, and that the LLC retracted those statements fully and without reservation. The second paragraph acknowledged that Iron Ridge's head instructor had engaged in a documented pattern of conduct towards students and parents that did not meet the standards of a professional instruction environment. The third paragraph was an apology to all students and families affected. It was not a warm document. It was precise and legal, and it did exactly what it was required to do, and that was enough. Emily hadn't needed warmth from it. She'd needed the false statements to be publicly corrected in the same public spaces where they'd been made, and that's what happened. Gloria Fenn shared it on the community board within the hour with no caption at all. The post got 263 likes before Emily stopped checking. Naomi Birch sent Emily a text. "I hope this is what it feels like." Emily wrote back, "What does it feel like?" Naomi, "Like something that was tilted got set level." Emily looked at that for a moment and then put her phone in her pocket and went back to work. She told Danny on Saturday. Not everything. He was 8, and 8-year-olds didn't need the full architecture. She told him that the problem with the instructor at Iron Ridge had been sorted out, that the instructor had been removed and the school was closed for now, and that she was sorry because she knew he'd liked the class. He thought about this for a moment in the serious way he thought about things. "Did he get in trouble?" Danny asked. "Yes," Emily said. "He did." "Because of what he did to you?" "Because of what he did to a lot of people," she said. "I was just the one it happened to in front of a camera." Danny turned this over. He was sitting across from her at Pauline's kitchen table, a half-eaten piece of toast beside him, his sneakers on the wrong feet because he always put his sneakers on the wrong feet initially, and then noticed and fixed it, and today he hadn't noticed yet. "Are there other places I could do martial arts?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. "There are a couple of good ones in Redstone. We'll look at them together." "Will you come in this time, instead of sitting in the car?" She looked at him. "I wasn't sitting in the car the whole time." "You were sitting in the car." "I was keeping an eye on the situation," she said. He gave her the look. Pauline's look. That careful, reading look that seemed to have skipped a generation and landed fully formed in an 8-year-old's face. "You could have just sat inside," he said. "You didn't have to sit in the car." "I know," she said. He went back to his toast, which he ate in the methodical way he ate everything, crust last. After a moment, he looked up again. "Aunt Em, you could have beaten him from the beginning, right? Like the first day?" She thought about the fluorescent lights above the blue mat on the first Tuesday, the way the room had laughed, the careful, deliberate act of getting up without using her hands. "Probably," she said. "Why didn't you?" She considered how to say it in a way that was true and that an 8-year-old could carry. "Because going there wasn't about beating anyone," she said. "It was about you getting to try something you were excited about. That was the whole reason." She paused. "And then it became about other things, but not about proving I could beat him. That was never the thing." Danny thought about this with the toast halfway to his mouth. "What was the thing?" he asked. "Making sure the right people knew the true version of what happened," she said, "and making sure it didn't keep happening to other people after us." He put the toast down. "Did it work?" "Yes," she said. "It did." He nodded, apparently satisfied, and picked the toast back up. He ate the crust last, as he always did, very deliberately, and then looked down at his feet. "My shoes are on wrong," he said. "I know," Emily said. "I was waiting for you to notice." James Sully's individual complaint resolved 6 weeks later through a separate proceeding that the Iron Ridge LLC settlement record substantially supported. He received a formal written acknowledgement and a financial resolution he described to Emily over a brief phone call as more than I expected and less than the principal was worth, which I've decided is fine. Britt Kamara's case took longer. 3 months, a formal hearing, Simone testifying in a closed session through her mother because she was a minor. What happened in that session wasn't public. What Britt told Emily afterward in a text that came through at 11:30 on a school night was, "She held it together the whole time. My 11-year-old held it together better than I did. I don't know what that says about her." Emily wrote back, "It says she's going to be okay." Britt, "Yeah, I think she is. The Trost family, Diane and Owen, had the simplest resolution. Owen's list was entered into the formal record. The case settled quickly, partly because Owen's documentation was the clearest of anyone's, and partly because Dale Price's attorney apparently looked at a 9-year-old's handwritten 5-point list about things that weren't okay and decided that defending against it was not a position anyone wanted to be in. Emily heard this from Renata with a professionalism that almost covered the satisfaction underneath it. Yes, Marcus Hale left Redstone. She didn't know where he went, didn't try to find out. She heard through Voss, who'd heard through someone else, that he'd relocated somewhere outside Colorado, that the National Registry flag meant he couldn't instruct anywhere in 43 states, and that the private security industry, where he'd apparently hoped to land, had its own background check infrastructure, and the Phoenix employment record was part of it now. He didn't take everything with him. He left behind a dojo that sat empty on Callaway Street for 2 months before a new tenant signed the lease, a children's art studio, which Pauline pointed out with the particular satisfaction of someone who appreciated a good substitution. He left behind a community board thread that stayed accessible as a public record, Owen Tross case documentation in the county court system, and a national registry entry that would follow his name wherever he tried to take it. He also left behind Trent Okafor, who used the pro bono legal resources Renata connected him to in order to file his own statement with the Colorado Department of Education's After-School Safety Division, a separate channel Emily hadn't even known existed. It didn't add anything to the legal record. It added something to the institutional one. Trent explained this to Emily in a parking lot conversation 3 months after the settlement, in the direct, slightly formal way he had, and she told him it was the right thing to do. "I should have done something earlier," he said. "You did something when it counted," she said. "Is that enough?" She looked at him. He was 23 or 24, the kind of age where you were still deciding what kind of person you were going to be. "Doing nothing is easier," she said. "You chose harder. Most people don't." She paused. "So, yes, it's enough. But also, you'll probably find yourself in situations like this again. And now you know what you'll do." He thought about that. "What will I do?" "Something," she said. He almost smiled. "That's not very specific." "It doesn't need to be," she said. Doubt. She went back to work, which was what she'd been doing the whole time in between everything else. The stroke patient from her first long shift of this whole story had long since gone home. The construction worker with the drain tube had come back in, a different complaint, months later, a respiratory thing that turned out to be nothing serious. And he'd recognized her at triage and thanked her again for explaining the drain, which he'd apparently described to 3 people as the clearest explanation I've ever gotten from anyone in a hospital. Emily had thanked him and moved on to the next patient. That was the work. That was what it actually looked like most of the time. Not the dramatic moments, not the saves that people described in grateful terms and wrote cards about, but the continuous accumulation of small, clear things done carefully for people who were scared or in pain or waiting for someone to just tell them the truth about what was happening to their bodies. She was good at it. She'd been good at it for a long time, and she hadn't needed anyone outside this hospital to recognize that for it to be true. But she noticed, with the particular noticing of someone who'd spent weeks being defined publicly in ways she hadn't chosen, that it was easier to work in the absence of the noise, that she came into shifts without the sideways energy of a situation being managed in her peripheral vision, that she ate lunch in the break room instead of at her desk because the break room was fine now and she hadn't fully realized it had been less than fine for a while. Dolores said to her once, around month 2 after the settlement, "You seem like you got some weight off." "I didn't know I was carrying it that visibly," Emily said. "You never do," Dolores said. "That's the thing about people like you. You think you're hiding it." "I wasn't hiding it. I was managing it." "Same difference," Dolores said, with 16 years of charge nursing authority, and went back to what she was doing. Sam. Redstone General's annual recognition lunch happened in late November. It was the kind of institutional event Emily usually attended briefly and left early, not from disrespect, just because 2 hours of organized appreciation made her back hurt, and she always had a report to finish. This year, the nursing director, a woman named Philippa Horn, who communicated primarily through precise emails and the occasional direct observation, stopped Emily on her way out and handed her a printed certificate. "Long service recognition," Horn said. 6 years. Emily looked at the certificate. her name on it, the hospital seal, the date. You could have mailed this, Emily said. I could have, Horn said. I didn't. She paused, and in the pause was something that Horn didn't say and didn't need to say. Some acknowledgement of the last several months, the video, the noise, the way the hospital staff had quietly closed ranks around Emily in the specific way healthcare workers closed ranks, not with statements or social media posts, but with covered shifts and break room solidarity, and Dolores calling Carl from security without being asked. Thank you, Emily said. You're a good nurse, Emily, Horn said, with the particular cadence of someone who didn't say that often and meant it completely when they did. You were that before any of this. You'll be that long after. Emily looked at the certificate for a moment. I know, she said. And she did. She'd always known it. That was the part that nobody who dismissed her had understood, that she didn't need their recognition for the thing to be true. The truth had been load-bearing long before anyone else saw it. What had changed was not the truth. What had changed was the paper record around it, the public acknowledgement of it, the clear corrective line drawn through the false version. The truth needed those things not for itself, but for Owen Trost and Simone Camara and James Sully and Naomi Birch, and everyone else who needed to see that the system could eventually, imperfectly, be made to reflect what was actually real. That was worth the wait of the last several months. All of it. What? Danny found a new martial arts school in January. Mesa Creek Training Center on the other side of Redstone, in a building that had actual signage and a website that listed all the instructors' credentials and the complaint process, which Danny noted was easier to find than the one at Iron Ridge, having apparently Googled this independently. The head instructor was a woman named Ro Castillo, former collegiate wrestler, patient in the particular way of someone who'd taught children long enough to know that patience was the whole job. She watched Danny's footwork in the first class and told him his base was solid, which made his face do the thing that Emily had been watching it do since he was born, the private, contained pleasure of being seen accurately. Emily sat in the folding chairs along the wall. She sat there the whole class. When the class ended and Danny came over with his bag, he looked at her with the Pauline look, the reading, careful look, and said, "You stayed." "I stayed," she said. "The whole time?" "The whole time." He thought about this. "Even the footwork part?" "I messed up the footwork the second time." "I saw," she said. "You fixed it on the third." He seemed satisfied with this. He picked up his bag and they walked toward the door, and outside the winter air was sharp and clean, and the parking lot was lit by the kind of overhead lights that made everything look slightly more real than it was. At the car, Danny stopped. "Aunt Em," he said, "why did you go to the dojo that first time, even after he knocked you down on Tuesday?" She unlocked the car, thought about the question honestly. "Because you asked me to take you," she said. "And some things you do because the person you're doing them for matters more than the discomfort of doing them. Even if someone knocks you down in front of everybody, getting knocked down isn't the problem," she said. "Getting knocked down and deciding the floor is where you belong, that's the problem." Danny got in the car. He thought about this while he buckled his seatbelt, and she started the engine, and they pulled out of the Mesa Creek parking lot into the January streets of Redstone. After 2 blocks, he said, "I don't think the floor is where you belong." She looked at him in the rearview mirror. "No," she said, "it's not." She drove them home through the dark, through the ordinary streets of an ordinary town that had been, for a few weeks, briefly extraordinary, and was now itself again. The stick figure drawing was still on her refrigerator when she got back. Red cross on the shirt, stethoscope around the neck, Aunt Emily in careful, uncertain letters. She looked at it for a moment before turning off the kitchen light. Some things you carry because they're worth carrying. Some things you set down because they were never yours to carry in the first place. The hard part, the real hard part, the part no one talks about when they talk about strength, is knowing the difference. It takes time. It costs something, and nobody gets it right every time. But you get up off the floor, you document what's true. You find the people who were hurt before you, and you add your voice to theirs. You do the work through the proper channels, even when the proper channels are slow and frustrating and don't feel like enough. And when someone tells you that the quiet woman in scrubs couldn't possibly be the thing that she is, you don't argue. You just keep being it, until the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. That's not a perfect ending. It's a true one. And sometimes when you've carried enough for long enough, true is more than sufficient.